Hi there, Jamie here at Teachers Tech. Hope you're having a great day today. Today I'm going to continue on my video series on how to use Microsoft Access for beginners. So if you've gone through my first video, you know that was a pretty simplistic database that we built there with only one table. So now I'm advancing to a little bit more higher level, but it's still going to be a very simple database, but we're going to make one with two tables and create that relationship between them. We'll dive more into how to customize your fields. We'll look at the form and how to add functionality to it with adding controls, and we'll take a look at a little deeper into queries and asking more questions from your data. So let's get started on this second lesson on how to use Microsoft Access. Before we get started opening up Microsoft Access, I just want to give you an example why we would use Microsoft Access instead of Microsoft Excel. Now, let's say we have a bunch of schools and students, and we want to create a database, what student goes to each school, and that's going to be the premise of what this database is today that we create. And if you could picture this having thousands of entries, I know I only have a few here, but we would have all these entries. So in the case of something like, if we looked at Hogwarts here, we can see in this example, there's two different students that went to Hogwarts. Now, if Hogwarts changed their phone number, then we would have to update every entry in this Excel spreadsheet. We'd have to go through and change it, replace each of those. Now, in a database, if we build a relationship between the two, we could create two different tables. And I'll just give you one more example of another reason why we might want to use a database over this. So in this case, let's say there's only one entry of a student going to a school. If we delete that entry and if they're gone, then that school is also off our list, but the school still exists. So, and if another student comes in, we'd have to re-enter all that information. So what we want to do in today's tutorial in Microsoft Access is we're going to create a table out of this information right here. So I'll just color this just a different color here. So this would be one table. It's going to be the student's information. And then over here, we're going to create another table, and this will be the school information. Then we're going to create a relationship between the two using the primary key to identify and connecting the two different tables. So let's get started today with our Microsoft Access tutorial right away. So I have Microsoft Access open here, and I just want to point out, if you are completely new to Microsoft Access, this video is a beginner's video, but if you're looking for even a simpler entry point, take a look at my video number 1, and I'll put a link down below in the description and up above in the card. And also this video is timestamped, so you can jump around to different parts of it. Just check below in the description. All right, so I have Microsoft Access open here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank database. And remember, when we go ahead to open it, we have to name it first because it will save it. And I'm going to call this database Schools of Magic, just like this. And I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now, just like before, when we did started our database, we have a blank table that is created automatically. And remember, we can delete these tables right away. If we go ahead and close it, then it goes away because it wasn't even saved yet. To create another table, and we're going to do that right away, I'm going to go up to create, and this is where I'm going to put in table, just like this. So create table. Now, there's two different tables I mentioned that we're going to create in this tutorial. And the first one is going to be for the students. And right now we're seeing, so as mentioned in my previous tutorial, we talked about different views that we can switch from. We're in the data sheet view, and then there's design view here. So it's right away, it's asking me to save it, and we're going to call this students, just like this. Students, hit OK. And you'll notice that this table is saved right now, and it has the name students. So this is where I can enter in my fields. And remember, we can jump around to our different views, our data sheet view. This is where we're going to see our different records. But to create our fields, we're going to be in this view right here. Now, right away when Access starts, it gives you this key next to this one. This is the primary key. This is something very important. I'll explain this a little bit more as the tutorial goes along. But what it's going to do is give a unique number to every student that gets entered in here. So I'm going to call this just student ID like this, and I'm going to leave it at auto number. So this will give it a new number every time I enter in a new student. So that works perfectly for that one. If I didn't want this to be a primary key, you can see I can just click on the primary key right up here and click on it again, and it comes back. So let's enter in the fields that we need for our first table here. I can see I forgot to put the T there, so I'll just go back and add the T to student. Now I'm going to continue and do my other fields. So the first one, we have our student ID, which is going to be unique to every student, but we want the name. So I'm just going to call this first name like this. And I capitalized the first and last, the first name and the last name, just so you can see it easier when the letters are capitalized to see what it is. And what do we want this to be? Well, short text. I could change this if I wanted to, as I mentioned in my other tutorial. But short text is what we want. It goes up to about 255 characters. That will do that just fine. So I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to type last name. And again, this can be short text, just like this. I am going to go over a little bit further ahead in this tutorial once we bring in some data. If I look at the bottom, the different information here, I'm going to talk about how you can customize these fields even more. But we're just going to enter in the fields here to start with. So next, I'm going to put blood status like this, because we're talking about half-blood, pure blood, all the things in Harry Potter, the muggles. And so this again will be short text. We're going to go into a start date like so. And this time I am going to pick something new. I'm going to pick date like this. So date time, just this one. And then we're almost done. I'm going to put school ID. This is going to be used actually to build the relationship with our other table. And again, I'm going to show you that a little later on and why we're putting this in. So that's school ID, and we can leave it. And I'm just going to leave it as short text right now, because we can go ahead and modify this a little bit, a little after too, because these numbers aren't going to be added up or anything. They won't be associated as a number. But again, I'll make some changes a little later on. The next one is going to be status, and what status is going to be, are they full-time, part-time, alumni, and again, just short text to it. And last, we're going to have a cell number just like this, and I can leave it as short text. And again, we'll do some modifications to how the formatting is a little bit on. So now we have our all the different fields entered in. I can switch, so I can right click on this, I could save this, and I can right click and even change to my datasheet view here. So this is where we could enter in our information. So if I was going to go through and I was just entering some names like so on this one, and I was just going to write in, and I can put the dates here. Notice when the date comes in, since I chose date, I get this little calendar, and I could go back and to a point in time where that information is. I'd have to go back. I'm just going to pick a date for this example. School ID, I know in my other table it's going to be 2 when we pick it here, and the status will say full-time, and cell number, we'll just make one up. I'm going to bring in some different information here in a moment, and I'll just do some random. So that's how we do an entry in this view. And as soon as I click on the next one, notice that this student ID is number 1. I could go ahead and enter in another one. And at the bottom, and I pointed this out in my last tutorial too, you can see how we can go through our different records through here. We can go back and forth. We could do filters, and we can even do searches. Now, I don't want you to have to go through and enter all this information into this data. So what I did was I have a spreadsheet here, and if you look down in the description, you're going to have access to this spreadsheet, and you're going to need to download this on your computer to Excel. So if you just go to the file and hit save as, you're going to be able to make a copy of this, or depending on which one, you just look for that save as depending on how you're seeing it, or making a copy and download it to your computer, because here's some information I collected for you that we're going to upload into Microsoft Access from Excel, and you're going to see that there's the student information here. And then if I click on the other tab, there's some school information. So maybe pause the video, download that so we can go on to our next step and upload this into our tables to save yourself some time. But you can enter the information if you want. The good way to enter information will be through the forms that we create a little bit later. It's a little bit easier to go through and edit or add new students to this. But anyway, download this video, and this is where I'm going to go to next, is upload this Excel spreadsheet. Before I upload the data from the Excel spreadsheet, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this record right here. So I just right click on this and delete. And yes, so it's gone, because I know I already put Harry Potter into the Excel spreadsheet, so I don't want him there to be twice. Now, the one thing I want to point out is when you have your spreadsheet, so to bring it back, I'll go to students. The headings here, so at the top, the headers have to be named exactly the same as over here, or else it's not going to work well for you. So make sure that between those up here are named the same. So if you were typing them in, you can bring a table in without having a table set up, and I'll show you that in a moment too. But right now, what I'm going to do is there's a couple of different ways. If we go to our external data here, I could bring in new source from file from Excel, or I could be right clicking on this, and you can see I can import from Excel. Right here it does the same. So I'm going to go to Excel, and at this point, so wherever you downloaded your document, your Microsoft Excel document to, you need to browse to that, and I have it on my desktop in this, and I called it Schools of Magic here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Now, do I want to import the source into a new table? Well, I have a table created, so I can bring it in at this time. So I'm going to actually append students here. So I'm going to hit OK. And the table is saying that it's currently open, so I can't bring this in. So what I have to do is actually close off this table and import again. So I'll go to Excel, and I'll go browse back to it. And it's again on my desktop, School of Magic, and I'm going to append this students one, so I'm going to hit OK. So it goes through and it's going to pull up the information in here, and I can see how it's kind of matching across the different ones. Notice that I have it's saying I have two different worksheets here, and when we import the information for school, we'll do it again, but we'll select the other one. But this is our student one, so everything looks fine here. I'm going to hit next. On this one, first row contains column headers. You notice I can't even change, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit finish like this, and it's saying it's done. So I could save the steps if it was something I was going to do over and over again and doing the same thing, but I'm not going to do it for this one. I'm going to hit close. It is there. I just have to double click on here and open it up, and you can see. So there's some corrections. I'm going to just stretch that out. It's just like Excel. It didn't find the information. So I went to the number sign because it was a little squished. I can stretch all these out just like in Excel. Now I want to bring in the other table information, and I didn't even make it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm under external data, and I'm going to go to from Excel again. I'm going to bring that exact same one back in again. And this time I'm going to import the source data into a new table. So I'll hit OK. And I don't want students, I want school. So you can see here's what it's going to look like. And I'm going to go next. First row contains column heading. Yes, it does. The first row does. So then it's changed it. So I can go next. You can specify information about each of these fields. You notice how I can change the different fields just like I showed you before when we were creating this. I'm not going to do this at this point. I'm going to go through and change it after. So I can go next. It's adding the ID, and I do need it to add an ID to this. So I'm letting Access add the primary keys. I could choose my own, but I'm going to let Access do this. I could go next, import, and we're going to call this school. So I'm going to actually add an S to this and call it schools and hit finish. And again, hit close. And now I have schools here. So I can see I've imported, and I can stretch these out again, just like before. If I double click, it goes to the correct width on each of these, like so. So now I have my information data's into the tables here. We have all these different records, and we can go to the next step. So in this part, what I want to do is build a relationship between the two tables. But before we do that, I just want to make a couple changes to the tables, just to make sure that we can identify them better and change one of the fields. And the first thing I want to do is I'm in the schools table right here, and I'm going to change my view to design view, and I'm going to change the name where it says ID. I want to change this. I'm going to put school ID in front of it. So I'm just going to write school just like this, just so it's easier to identify what tables and what fields you're connecting to. But that's the one change on this one. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And over in students, I'm going to go to this design view, and I'm going to change the school ID here, and I want it to be a number, just like that. So those are the two changes before we make our relationship here. Now, to explain the relationship that I want to have happen between these, I'm going to switch my view back to datasheet view here. Save it. Yes. Okay, so what I want you to notice that I have this school ID inside of the schools, and so inside of the students here. And so what that means is, so if we look, for example, look at the second record here of where Harry Potter, it says school ID 1. Now, if I look over at schools right now, I'll go to the design view here, there we go. If I look at number 1 is Hogwarts. So that is connected to there, but it isn't connected yet. We're going to make it connected. So we need to make a relationship. When this record sees number 1, it knows it's referring to this record here. So that's why we need the relationship. All right, so just a little bit about the primary keys, and I talked about them before. We have our primary key. If I switch back to our design view here, it's right at the top of this one, and I'll switch back to our design view here, right at the top. Make sure you don't use things like names or phone numbers or emails or anything. These need to be unique. I mean, I usually leave it just with auto number, just like that, so it creates that unique number every time. So making sure that this has to be a unique for the primary key for each record. All right, so let's go ahead now. We're going to create our table. So our relationship, and it's going to be under database tools. So I'm going to click on this. The one thing is, before you can create a table, or you probably noticed it before, if I have the tables open, it tells me I have to close them first. So I'm going to go ahead and just close these down, because you can't do it unless they're closed down. So now I'm going to click on the relationships right here. And you can see we have add tables. So I can drag them out. I could double click on them. I could click on them and add selected tables on it. So if I just hold shift down, select both, and then add them, I can do that way. So I have these two. I'm going to close this out right now. I have these two different tables here, and all I need to do is connect them, and it's as easy as dragging over. And what I want to connect with is, I'm just going to move the order of these around here. So I'm going to take this school ID, and I want to connect it to this school ID down here. So this is a primary key. Each one gets identified with its unique number. And all I need to do is click, so left click and hold and drag and connect to the one that I need. So right there, school ID, and this pops up. So what this is telling me, I can change it from this point too, but this is the connection that I want. I want school ID over here to school ID over here. And I'm going to click this one right here, this enforce right here, because what it's going to do is that so right now I have 7 schools, and if someone put a number 8, there is no number 8, so it wouldn't allow you to do that unless I added a number 8, and then you'd be able to do it. So I'm going to enforce it, so it depends on how many schools are there. So at this point, all I'm going to do is hit create, and you can see at this point I have this line that goes across, and I don't know, I'll try to zoom up on this, but I have a number 1 up here, and the infinity sign down here, which means many. So the connection here is a one-to-many. There's other different connections, relationships that you can do, whether it be one-to-one or many-to-many. This one is just the one-to-many. I'll have other tutorials where maybe I talk about the many-to-many relationship with tables. So we have our relationship now. And so what does it mean? I just want to point out between these two, this connection, the relationship here, the fields need to be both in numbers since the school ID is in a number, and that's why I changed that field. So just real quickly, if I go back to the students table and go to my different view here, you can see that I changed, I told you to change this to number. That was because with this one here, this is a number up here. So I needed to make sure that with the relationship that the fields were, I couldn't have this as short text and since this was a number. So I made sure that this was a number and this was a number. So if I go back now and open up the students table, looks like nothing has changed, but I'm just going to go ahead and add a new record. Let's say I'm going to one of these schools of magic here. I'm going to enter a date, doesn't matter. And school ID, look what happens when I'll put 8 in here and I'll click off of it. And I'm just gonna go through and enter some of these things. So it's saying you cannot add or change a record because a related record is required in the school. So right now there is no number 8 in there. So if I had entered another school, then it would work. So if I was gonna put number 7, this would work at this time and I could go through and finish entering my record like so. And if I go now to my schools table, you can see that I'd be going to this school here. Since there was no 8, there'd be no connection. I want to show you how you can edit your relationships too. So I'm just going to close these down here. And there's a few different ways you can edit it, but even if you hover over this line, you can notice that it's highlighted now. If I right click on it, I actually get delete if I want to delete that relationship, or I could edit the relationship. You can see it pops open here. I do want to point out these other ones here. So cascade up, update related fields. So if I click on this one and I'm going to hit OK, I just want to point out, you can see how it says one-to-many there too. I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to go over and open up the schools one here. Notice that I have this plus sign here, and what that means is I can open this up. And it shows me that the students that are connected to that school. So with any of them, it gives that different view by hitting that cascading one. So that was going, and remember you have to close tables to do anything, do this, but that was just going back and editing. Even if I double click on school ID and I selected my table, my connection here, it shows the different ones. And I can turn it off again and hit OK, and that will be gone. So that's a little bit about the connection in the relationship between the two tables. In this next part, I want to talk about the fields inside your tables and how you can customize them to help with the input, or how you can read them too. And you can kind of force things to happen so less mistakes are made when people are inputting their data. So to do this, I need to switch to the other view here. So instead of datasheet view, we're going to go into design view. And I just want to point out, when I click on an empty cell, notice that there is nothing now showing. But as soon as I click into one of the fields, I get the options here under general. And this is where we're going to make some customization. I'll go over a lot of the different things. I won't go over everything, but definitely things to get you understanding how this can help you. Now, let's start with looking at the student ID and auto number. I'm not changing anything on this one. I'm leaving it as long integer. If I click down, click in any of these, notice you get the drop downs beside it here too. So that's where you can be checking for different formats, just like that. So you can see if it's a number, I could choose a different number, general number, currency, and different things like that. But I'm just leaving this one untouched. Now let's move to first name. Now to point out, so this is short text. When it defaults in short text, the first thing I want to point out, notice that it says field size 255, and that means characters. What's meant by that is, so you got 255 characters to enter in. For a first name, that's way too much, and you don't want people entering in more than what their name is, whether it be just randomly typing something in or copying and pasting something over, and it fills it up, makes the database larger. So we can restrict this. So if I go ahead and make this 50, and I could make it shorter than this, it could be 40, and then that will mean that the most characters that they could put in is 40. So first name, I would think that's long enough. Now I'll show you later on in one of the examples here, and I'll make something too to force people to that. Now, with this example, first name, that's all I'm going to do with this one is just change the field size. I just want to point out caption here. What caption means is, so you can see how it's labeled as first name. If I wanted it to come out like when I'm creating a form to be the caption to come out, instead I would write the caption here. So if I was just going to write name, then that becomes the caption that comes out there. But I'm not going to change any of that because you can do that later on too. All right, so first name, all I'm doing is changing that part. I'm going to go to last name. Same thing. I don't need 255. I'll leave it as 40. And now I'm going to go to this next one. This is where it's kind of I'm going to do a drop down in this one. So I'm going to allow people to choose what they need to go in. So what I mean, if I drop down here and look at the very bottom, there's a lookup wizard. If I click on lookup wizard, now I could have a list of different things from a table that I could bring in. So if I had a long list of a drop down or how many things on a table, I could bring that table in. For my example here, I'm just going to type in what I want. So I'm going to go to next. And I only need one column here. So at this point, I'm going to write, so that I want the options to be pure. And then I'll click on another one, and then it will be half, and we'll go muggle, and I'm going to put human like this. I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to leave everything. Do you want to limit entries to the choices? Limit to the list. So yeah, I want to limit to the list. I don't want them to add anything else. But if there was a different one, then I would click this off. But for now, I'll just leave it limit to the list. And do you want to store? I'm leaving this all the same. I'm going to go ahead and hit finish. So I'm going to give you a quick look what it's looking like right now. So if I go and hit save this, hit yes, because it's made changes. And I'm going to go to my datasheet view. Take a look now. If I click in here, you can see that there's drop downs and I can change. So when entering new information, I just have to click that drop down and pick which one I want. So that's an easy thing to add to it. All right, let's go back to our design view and continue down what we could look at. We have a start date here. So date and time. I'll show you what you can change here. So it says short date. If I click here, I could change this. Right now, we just have it listed as this short date. So maybe if I want the month to show, I could click on this. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Go to my datasheet view, and you can see now the start date is here. So it comes up with the month on it. I'll go back to my design view. I'm going to leave it as a short date like I had it before. I am going to add an input mask here. So an input mask allows me to, it helps with people entering in to know how to enter it in. So if I go and click on this, I'll save it. So it comes up with this wizard. How do you want to have it entered? I'm going to leave it at like short date right here. If I click in here, it shows me kind of the example that will be set up, how it will be looking in the when I'm inputting a record. So I'm going to go next. Again, you can pick on how you want the character, the placeholders here. I'm just going to leave it the same, but I just want to point out. And if you click in here, it will say try it again. So if you change that and hit try it, then you'll see the difference that it makes. So next, I'm going to hit finish. Doesn't seem like anything happened. You can see there's an input mask here. I'll save it. I'll go back to my datasheet view, and if I click in here, you can see right away that now I have that's what a mask does. It allows me to enter in the information. So now I could just kind of follow along how I was going to enter it in. So I'm just going to go back to my other design view here, and we're going to continue down. We have school ID, this number. I'm actually going to leave this one the same. I'm not going to change anything to this. I am going to make some changes to the status here. Like I mentioned, so with the status is showing whether students are full-time, part-time, or they're alumni, just some things I've made up just to show as an example. Short text is fine, but I'm only entering PT or FT or AL, 2 characters, and I can force people to this. So if I put 2 right here, and I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back here and do my to my datasheet view. If I'm clicking down here, if I try to type in more, it won't let me. So it just stops at that point. So I could type 1 in, but I can only go maximum 2 on this. So switch back to my design view again. I want to make some more changes to this too. So here's another thing you can do. I want to force all caps on this. And how I do this is just put the greater than sign. So if I put the greater sign there, if you wanted to force it lowercase, you just put the less than sign. And then what I can do at this point, and I'll hit save, and I'll go back and to enter in my data. At this time, if I try to type in small and click out, you can see it just puts it to all cap like that. All right, let's go make a couple more changes to this one. We'll go to our back to our design view, and there's a few more things I want to show you what you can do. If I look at below here, below the caption, into default value, I can force a default value like where it has to be that one thing. So if it was going to be, it has to be FT, then they couldn't write anything else. But that's not the case in here. But if there was something you knew you wanted to force, you could put it there. Now, the other thing what I can do is I'm going to put in like, and this will mean if it's like these things. So if it's going to be like FT for full time, and if I'm going to put, or what was my other options, it's going to be PT for part time. And notice I'm putting things in quotation marks here. And then the other one, I have one more, or it's going to be AL for alumni. Just like that. Now, I am going to add something else here under validation text, because this is going to be the message that comes up if it's not like one of these others. So I'm going to paste it in. It says, please enter the student status, FT, full-time, PT, part-time, AL, alumni. So it makes it easier for people to know what's happening. I'm going to go ahead and save this here, like so, and I'm going to go back to my datasheet view, and let's try entering in a little bit of information. I'll just put my own in here, and I'll do the drop down. I'll be half in this case. I'll just put some, whoops, I'm in the wrong spot here. So let me go to the very beginning here. I'm going to put 1980. We'll just make up some days in here, and I'll be at school for. And at this time, I'm going to put, if I put something else, TR, click out, I get the message. Please enter the student status. And I go, okay, now I can go ahead and go make the changes here. So if I was going to be part-time, it allows me to go to the next one. All right, I'm going to actually delete this record again. And now I'm just going to go back and finish this last one off, and we're going to look at our design view in cell number. You can add a mask for this one, just like I showed you inside the date. If I go to input mask and click in the input mask here, it will pop up here. And it's the top one is phone number. Take a look at all the different ones, the input mask you could add. But if this is the one I want it to be, if I click in here, I could try it and put in the numbers. I go next. You can see I can change the placeholder character to something else. I'm going to leave this the same, and I'm just going to go next. And now this is how it gets stored. I don't need to store the dashes and the space and everything, so it will get stored. It gets viewed like this for input, but when it gets stored, it will just be like that, and that's what I want because it will save a bit of space. Go next, hit finish. And you can see that there's an input mask there. And I'm going to go ahead, save this, and just go to datasheet view. So now if I click in this, you'll see that now with how a phone number is set up, it will be there. Probably you'd want to be doing these things before. You'd want to set up your fields before you enter in any records like I've been showing you, but we did import first. But you can do this, you can make the changes after too. So if I go, I'm going to go back to design view here, and I just want to point out a couple more things here and just looking at required, probably like for the first name or last name, I could, as soon as I go to this one, is it required? And then you can see the drop down yes. So I would probably go to these so people couldn't get through without putting these in. So you can make them required, and that's probably an important thing so you don't have that missing information. So that's a little bit about entering into or changing the fields, and so it can make your life easier when entering the different records into it and help people entering it so then they know what they're supposed to. But let's go over to forms now and create a form where we can add controls, because you'll find a lot of times this is where you want to enter your information from, especially if you construct the form well. So now what I want to do is create a form to enter in new records. Now we could enter it in just kind of like the way I've showed you before. We could go across, we could go through the, next record and enter in a brand new one at this point. But if you go up, and let's say I have this table selected and I go to create up top, and now you can see there's different forms here. I'm just going to do a form from here quickly and then do another one from the wizard. So if I go ahead and click on form, it creates a form out of all the different fields that are there. And I could go through and use the next record, last record at the same thing. You can see as I go through, it moves them. I'm going to change my view. When you're in the design view, you can move things around, and if you had it all set up, you probably won't want to do that. But if I go to form view, this is where I can't grab things and move things around. Now, if you look, if I click in where blood status is, it has the drop down that I created from the fields. And if I click in start date, you can see if I go to new record here and I go to start date, it has the format with the overlay that I put into it. But let's say if you didn't want that, what you would need to do, and I'm just going to close this, is go back to your design view here, to your date, and delete the mask that we put in. Save this up. Just I would say close this down again, and then you can open it up. And when you go back to create this time, so if we go to our form, you'll be able to see we have and I'll go to our different view here. You'll see if I click in here, I get the calendar back because it makes it a little easier to kind of select a date like that. So that was just our form view. But what I really want to spend time more is we'll create one from our wizard view now, and I'll show you how you can manipulate, change it to get the form looking the way you want and getting the right inputs into it. So let's create a form using the form wizard, and I'm under the create tab, and when I go into the ribbon, I'm looking for form wizard. I'm selecting this. So it shows what table I'm selecting from. I could move one over at a time, move it back, or I can move them all over. And I know I don't want student ID in this one because it doesn't really mean anything for people entering in the information. So what I'm going to do is just move that one back and keep all these other ones in here. So I can go next. You have a choice of the layout. You can kind of click on each one and play with each one if you want. I'm just leaving it as columnar there. I'm going to go next. Now at this point, you can either open, it's just asking what view do you want it to be in. Do you want it to be in design view, or do you want to go and view and enter the information? So if I go right here and hit finish, it goes right to the form, similar to what I showed you before. But what I want to do is start showing you how you can make some changes. So I'm going to right click on this and go to design view on it. So when you go to design view, this is where you can move things around. I just want to point out, up the top, there is a header. If I select header, you can see I have property sheet open on the side. If you don't have this open, it's this tab right up top I have open. Maybe it was defaulted to this one, but I'm under the property sheet here. If I click on the footer, that's down here. If I click in here into any of the other titles or any of the other fields, you see how the property sheet will change. So just to point out a few things about movement right away, when I click, we get different handles. Notice that when the yellow handles, if I grab them, when I get that right there, that icon, if I move them, as soon as I let go, it actually moves everything together. At first, it looks like it's moving only the one, but it moves both. But if you grab the gray handle from either of them, then that will move the individual one. So if you wanted to realign them, you just grab the gray handle by itself rather than just the yellow. So the yellow grabs both, when you select it like so, you'll see it move around. But then if you grab the gray, you can see how it's becoming unattached that way. So just a couple things about the movement there. All right, I'm going to move just them back. We'll do some more customization in a bit. All right, so now to start with, what I just want to point out, so if I start with the title here, and what I want to do is, you can see that I have this, it's open to the data tab right now. We have different tabs. We're going to format this under the format tab. You can see that the caption says students here. Maybe I want to change that to be students information. So I'm going to make this a little larger, and I can type in information right in here like so. If I click off of it and click in it again, you can see that it updates it here. Is it visible? Yes, I want that visible. If I said no, it wouldn't be visible. I can drag this around. I'm going to grab the yellow and I can match it, to where I want. So some other things I want to point out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can format your font and everything. If you look down, you can see that there's font weight. So if you wanted it to be, I'll say extra bold on this, the alignment, maybe I want this centered like this. So there's different ways you can change this around. Do I want a larger font? I'll make this a little larger like so, and you can change all these different ones. So what I also can do, maybe on the back style, it's under transparent, I want to be normal. You can see how it goes to white, just like that. I'm going to change it back, or I can pick a background color. I'm going to select these second ones here, and I'll go with a darker, but that doesn't make the font show up, so I can go to the font color. If I look down below here, it's right, where'd it go here? Font weight, center. Right here, and click here, and I'm gonna choose white, and you can see that right there, now it's white. So I can be editing all these things inside here. I can take a view, go to my design view, not my design view, my form view. You can see the changes that are happening here. There's other things. If I want this wider, I can adjust it this way. I can make any of these wider too. If I want it for a cell phone number, you wouldn't need it like that. So you could go through. If you wanted to select multiple ones at a time, if I drag through like this, notice I've selected all of them. So if I only drag down to 3, it selected those ones. So some different ways to select, and if I grab multiple ones, I can move them around. You can use Control Z and for the undo, and it puts things back if you move something and you didn't want it there. So that's a little bit about the formatting. You can go through and add your own formatting to this and set it up the way you want. You can make this, if you need it more room down below, you can do it that way too. So if I go to back to my form view, you can see now I have some more place to put the controllers, what I'm going to show you in a moment. But first, I want to do a couple other updates on this too. And the first will be to change how these names are displayed. So I'm just going to go back to my design view and just click in here, and you can see it says last name like this. I can change it either over here or here, but I want a space right here. So if I go and put a space, and I want a space here, these are just the caption names, so it's not changing anything in the fields or anything. And I'm going to make a couple of changes just so it makes it easier. And I could add more than just adding a space too. So if I wanted to have school start date or any of this, so I'm going to put ID and then cell number. So just so we have it looking a little bit better. And like I said, we can change it over here, add the space, and it should update right. Oop, I didn't get that updated. So I'm going to go back to here, add the space, click off of it, and you can see now that all these spaces are here. If I go in design view, if I go into form view, you can see all those spaces. And I can do all the same things that I showed you before with the fonts, changing the font size. So any of these, if I select it, if you take a look at all the different, whether you want a border around this and changing the color, just like I did to students information, you can do that. So what I want to do next is show you some more options how you can make this as an easier entry form. So I'm just going to go to form view. Now, with the blood status here, this pulled through to what we created. You could create this in the form view. So I'm going to kind of do this with school ID. Will be slightly different, but with we could have created our drop down at this point if we didn't do it in the field. So what I would like right here, this school ID, I'm going to delete it and I'm going to put something else in, because if you're entering information, the two might not mean, unless you have them all memorized, and if we only have 7 schools, if you had a lot more, it could be troublesome trying to know, you might make some mistakes. So I want a drop down that will actually show, to be able to show what school it is that they can select. So I'm going to go back to design view here. And to do this, I'm going to go up to the controls and bring a combo box down. But before I do that, I just want to point out some of the different controls. I'm not going to go over them all here. You can kind of play with them to drop them down and see what they all do. But if I just expand this, you can see all these different controls. This is just showing the mouse control. That's what I'm on right now. This is a text box that if I select any of these, notice that the property sheet changes to what it is. If I wanted to just have a label, so we have our labels over here, and we have our text boxes that we can add. We have a button, and I'm going to go over buttons over a little bit because we can make them do stuff when we add controllers to that. But I'll go over it in a moment. But take a look at all the different things, from links to images to checkboxes to adding attachments. There's lots of different things you can do, and I'll talk about these in future tutorials a little bit more. But for our purposes right now, this is what I want. So if I just go ahead and select this, notice when I bring my mouse down, I have this, I just have to click where I want it. So it puts it in, and it's called Combo Box 19 Unbound. So I haven't told it what I want it to capture yet. I'll delete the other school ID once I'm finished this, and I can rearrange the way I want. But now if I go, I'm going to choose this one. I want the combo box to get the values from another table or query. You can see you could type in, just how I had the pure blood stuff and the half blood, all these things I could do it the same way. But what I want it to do is to pull from the other table, and then I need to get stored in a table also. So if I go next, well, where do I want this to pull from? Well, it's going to pull from the schools here, and I'm going to go next. And what is it? I need the school ID and the school name. And those two are the things that I want. I'm going to go next. And what do I want? I'll go in school name in ascending order. So it'll be in alphabetical order. And I don't need to put anything under 2. I'll go next. And it shows me what's happening here. This will be the list. And you can, if I click this off, you can see it shows the school ID. I don't want it to show the school ID. And if I go next now this is important. Where do you want this stored? So I need to store, if you were putting a new record in, this needs to get stored into a table. So I need to tell it where I want it to store. So if I drop down, this is the student ID table. I needed to get it stored in school ID. So it's going to place the school ID into the table correctly, but it's going to show me display something else. So next, what do I want to call this? So it's good to call these. If you're putting any of these controllers on, it's good to put a name on these, so then you can identify it easier. So I'm going to call this school select, just like this. And I'm going to hit finish. And now, before I move it or anything, I'll just show you. If I go over to, I'm going to go over to my form view and look at this. So now I have this drop down with all the schools, but right away you can see, well, that label isn't very good there. I should call this something else. And then this is not large enough. I need to stretch this out. So if I go back to design view, and as I said, I can delete this one right here. I don't need it. So I'm just going to hit delete. You can right click on it and there should be a delete right there. And I'm going to take this one and I'm going to place it into the same spot. And you might want to change the order. And like I said, I could stretch this out because I know some of the schools are longer in name. I can go to here and I'm going to change this to select school, just like that. So let's see how we have it. We go back to, I'm going to hit save, go back to our design view, go back to our form view. And everything looks like they fit. So if I was creating a new entry, so I just click the bottom, I could be just picking a different one here, or picking the school that it belongs to by name. You know, the start date is coming up as this. Our blood status is a drop down that it pulled from the field. But like I said, you could add that the same way as we selected the school here, and this information is open. And we can still customize this too, because the cell number here, if I go back to design view, and you can make your changes accordingly if you need to size things to make things look a little bit differently, just all the ways that I've showed you. Make sure, take a look at under the format, again, all the different things that you can do. If you pick all, you see everything at once, how you can adjust it. I'm not going to go through the entire list in this tutorial. The other thing I just want to point out, when you're designing this, take a look. You can add things like images. If you these are just ones I've already selected, or you could browse, but if I just select it and click, and then I can have an image on here, and I can size this differently. You can place this where you want, and when you take a look at the form view, it's going to be right there. So the other things just to point out, you can insert charts based off a table. None of the tables that I have right now will make much sense for a chart, but you can go through and pick the source, and it will be put in, it can display that chart. If you want to make your headers and footers look better, take a look at right through here where we could be inserting date, time, titles, logos, to really maybe brand it towards your corporation or however you're using it. So these are just some of the things for forms that you can do to create, to make it look more easily to enter your information. And then take a look again at all the different controls that you can add to here to get more functionality. Because next what I want to do is add some buttons, so you could enter some records or delete records just from some simple buttons right on the form. So let's give it a little bit more functionality to this form by adding some command buttons, controls up here. So this is what I want to add this time, this one right here. It's a button. You can see under the property sheet how it says command button. I'm just gonna, it's already selected, so I just have to click, and then I get the command button wizard. So what do I want this to do? So you can see if I click on different categories, you know, I could delete a record, I could go through and do different ones, I could print a form, I could print a report, and you can see all these different ones if I want to quit the application. Let's just put a first one here, and we're gonna say, let's go to next record here. So I'll go next. And what do I want to happen? So right now there's an arrow, it kind of gives a little demo there. I just wanted to have some words on it instead. I could change whatever words I want by changing them up here. I'm going to leave it as this. I'm going to go next. And I want it to call, I don't want it to leave it as command 34. I'm going to call it next so I know what it is. When I see it and hit finish, then there's next record. You can move these around too. You can make them larger. And so you could adjust them there to where you want, line them up using the grid. And then you take a look, you can see over in the property sheet here, what it's called is next under the name here. And you can go through and change, you can change things here. So if I wanted it to be a different color, you can quickly do that to the adjust. So always check under the property sheet. I want to add another button here. So I'm going to go up to this one again, select it, click here, and now let's say I want to delete a record, and then I could go next, and I'm going to just go to text again and hit next, and I'll call this one delete, like so, and go finish here. Oh, I can't see what I'm writing here, and delete, and hit finish, and we have delete record. I could size it just like how I had this one, just to fit exactly the same way. So I can adjust it too. So you might want to play around depending if you want it above each other, side by side, and you can make all these adjustments to get it exactly the way you want. You can have your colors again and adjust everything the same way that I showed you before. If we go back to it, we'll go to recent, so it's the same color. Maybe if you take a look at your font name and everything, you could change that. You could make a larger font if we adjust it, and I'll go to the next one and make it so it probably wouldn't fit with the other one, but you can still make it larger. Maybe I'll make this 14, just so we can see it a little bit better. If we go to our form view, you can see now I have next, next, next. If I wanted to delete a record, it's going to ask me, do I want to delete this and take this out? So it gives some functionality right here. It's doing the similar things to what's happening in the records down here, but now it just makes it a little bit easier. And plus, if you take a look at the different things that the button can do when you add it through the wizard, again, if you do want to have that quick print option or close the form down, take a look at the different ones that you can do to the buttons. So that's a little bit about functionality in the forms, the different ways you can customize it. And to straighten things all out at the end, you notice how things aren't lined up. And if I go to my form view, you can see everything's out of whack here. If I go to my design view and I want to do a quick alignment, let's say to the left, if I grab this and select everything selected there, if I right click, take a look at alignments, and this can save you some time. You don't have to do everything at once, but I'm just going to grab everything and go to the left. And now if I look at my form view, everything's lined up this way. But what I could do is if I needed to move everything, since everything's aligned, I could move it away from the edge a little bit like this. And then I could go to my form view and you can see now this one's lined up here, but I could go back and it seems like this one right here needs to be lined up. So if I go back to my design view, I'm going to grab this one here and move it to there, and I can see, and I'll just try to match it to it gets right in there. So now if I go back to my form view, you can see that things are lined up. Again, you can customize it the more you want to however you would like with colors and everything else. So now what I want to go to is the queries, because queries are, I think, what the most important thing here is what you can find out about all the different records that you've created. You're going to ask Microsoft Access questions and it's going to give you back the answers you're looking for. So we're going to look at two different ways. We're going to look at sorting, then we're going to create some queries too. Right before I get into the queries, I just wanted to show you an example of adding a record. And I did add another button. You can see add record right here. I did it the same way that I added these ones. So for example, if I was just adding through here, and I'll just put myself, and I'll pick a blood status and a start date. With these ones too, you might want to choose the other way that we had instead of this calendar, because it might be easier to enter a year if it was going in the past, but I'll just pick a random date here. I'm just going to select a school. We'll go to Hogwarts and status is going to be FT. Remember, if I do that wrong, it will pop up with the same message. And I'll put in a phone number here really quickly, like so, and I can hit add record. So as soon as I add the record, I'm going to go over to my students table, and you can see that if I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this one here. So let me close this down and open this up, and there I am at the very bottom here with all that information that I added. So you can see through the forms, it can be an easier way, especially if you're giving it to somebody to enter in the data for you. So let's look at a couple different ways that we can sort our data, then ask questions of it through the queries, creating queries. Now, first of all, I just want to quickly go over sorting, and it's sort of like Microsoft Excel, how it works here. But if you look at the headers here, or the fields, we have these little arrows right here. If I drop down, you can see we have our sort, where we can quickly, if I wanted to go sort A to Z, as I click on it, it puts them all the records in that order. So you can see it just clicking, you can quickly change it. If you wanted to go maybe over to the status here, if I click status and I only wanted to see full time, I could click off. Just like that, and it quickly gives me that information that I can glance at to find out. So through sorting, you can do some very quick things. If you look up top here, I can remove sort or toggle. Toggle goes back and forth between the sort view. So I click on it again, brings me back. That's a nice feature so that you don't have to remove your sort, where you can just compare it back and forth. But you can also remove it. We do have our sorts up here too. So if you're looking at any of these, if I click on filter, you're going to see it pop open where we have our ascending and descending through here. So I just wanted to point out how you can sort through your different records this way very easily to get that quick snapshot. But what I find is more powerful is creating the queries, and that's what we're going to do right now. So now I want to ask a question or create a query about what students and what blood types go to each school. So based on the data that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and create our query, and just like when we created our tables or forms, we need to go to the Create tab up top. And you can see that we have Query Wizard or Query Design. And I've been jumping back and forth between the two different ones. In this case, I'm going to do Query Design, but you could go ahead and do Query Wizard and it'll walk you through too. But I'm just going to go ahead and select it. Sometimes what happens is I double click on it and end up having selected this cross tab at the same time. You don't want to have cross tab selected. You want it just under this select here at this moment. So I'm going to go ahead now. All right, this is where I'm going to create my queries or put my tables, and I'm just going to stretch this up. So I'm just going to put this up so everything's closer into view. Now I need to add the tables that I want to be working with, and they're over here and I haven't added them yet. To add them, I can just double click on the ones or select and add tables. So I'm just going to double click and you can see the relationship that's between the two that we've created, that one to many right here. I'm just going to stretch this out so we can see all the different fields in this. Notice, and I'm not doing this in this one, but we can see we could actually add another query to a query too, but I'll talk about that in later tutorials. So what we want to do first is add fields to our query, what we're going to question. So for example, if I double click on name, or I could drag it down, but I'm just going to double click, it goes into field right here. You can see field and has table. And I'm going to run this right away. So all I'm asking with this query is give me first names back based on my data here. So I'm going to go up top and hit run. And there it is. Just like that. It has all the different first names of the different students. I'm going to click on view again, go back. And the other thing I just want to point out, notice that, so it's coming from the students table, but there's a sort here too. So if I go ahead and go ascending or descending and run it, now you can see that it's in alphabetical order there. So just another thing that you can sort this information. So I'm going to go back to my query here, and I'm just going to go just not sorted for now. This check mark means whether to show this, and I'll give an example of this a little bit later on. So let's put our last name now. So I'm going to go ahead and put last name, and at this point, if I do a quick run, you can see now I have the two columns. I can stretch these out or create them larger so I can see them like this. If I go back to my other view and I just want to show you this check mark now, so if I uncheck it and run it, notice you only see the first name, but it's still performing this. It's just not showing it. All right, so those are just two simple things about just the names. I still want to add in blood status, so I'm going to add this one. And the last thing I want to add right now, I'm going to jump to the other table, is add school name right here. So if I go ahead and run it, you can see everything is coming up from the database, because I haven't really specified any information from there what I want to pull yet. What I'm going to do right now is actually just save this. I'm going to right click and save this query, and I'll just go ahead and call this query is going to be called blood type, just like this, and hit OK. Notice on the side, on the left-hand side here, I have queries that is now added that gets saved to this. If you don't see it, check to see what you have open here. I have all access, so if I was only under tables, all I'm going to see are my tables. But if I go all access objects, then I see everything there. Okay, so I have just 4 things here, and the first thing what I want to do is just to do a simple query based on a criteria. So the criteria, anything that I can put things in multiple columns here under the criteria, and that kind of means like an end. So it would be and this, and this, and this, and I'll show you kind of examples, and you can see underneath is the or. So I could add more and more, and that would be the or. So let's go ahead and put one thing in. What I'm going to do actually is just go to my schools here, and I'm going to just copy paste this so I don't have to write everything out. I'm just going to go Control C, go back to my query, and see where it says criteria under school name. I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in. But I do want to show you something. I'm going to go ahead and run it, and I don't think it's going to give me anything back here, and notice if I run it, it doesn't give me anything back. There's something happened when I copy paste this, and I knew it was going to happen. I just wanted for you guys to see this error if it happens to you. Notice I copied in, and it has the word end in there. So I'm just going to point this out, and it changed because end is kind of a part of a command that is in here, and it took that as not part of the word, and it added those quotation marks around it. So it changed actually what I was looking for on it. So you just got to be careful. If I was typing it in, it wouldn't have been the problem, but I need that out of there just like that. And because those quotation marks go around everything, not going to be in the inside, so it would have been changed to what we're looking for. So if I go ahead and hit run, all it's going to give me back now are the names. So that was my first criteria. Give me back anybody in Hogwarts, so it didn't return any of the other ones. So you can do this now if I wanted this to be ascending by last name, or let's say there, and I go ahead and run it again, you can see now it's based on the last name in alphabetical order through there. And if I go back, if I want to change these around, so if I can drag any of these that I put in certain order, I could go ahead and delete them if I want. But if I want to move it, if I kind of click in here, you'll be able to see there, I'm clicking, holding, and I'm going to drag it to the front. Now it's last name, and I can go ahead, hit run, and now the last name is first. So you can change the order, or you can delete these columns if you wanted to. And also under your, I just want to point out, you can change from right here too. So if I wanted a different field, I could drop down, change my tables, or I could change my fields at any time right here. So if I wanted to add another thing, so this would be like saying end, if I wanted to define all the purebloods from Hogwarts, I could click in there and type pure. So now if I go ahead and run it, it's only going to find one. So that's some simple search using criteria in it. But remember, and I'll go over this more, we could put an or in here. So what I mean is if I was going to go, and I'm going to go back to the schools table, and I'm going to pull out let's say just this name right here. So I'm just going to copy, and I'm going to go back to this. If I put that down here, it's going to look for Hogwarts or this. So now if I go ahead and view this again, notice now it's found it in Drumstrang here, and it's also found it in Hogwarts. So that's the or on it versus the end of the pure that I put in under a criteria. So those are the first few things. Let's move on with some more things that we can do with the queries. So now in the query, what I want to show you is how to use parameters inside of it and how to use wildcards. So what I'm going to do, and I've deleted the information that I had in before, to use the parameters, it forces an entry. So what I mean is, if I click in here in the criteria and go ahead, I'm going to use these square brackets. So I'm going to open up, actually I'm going to open and close just like this. Watch what happens when I hit run now. It comes up with this enter parameter. We really don't know what we're supposed to enter, but it's under the school one, so it's going to be the school. But you wouldn't know that if you were just running the program and someone told you enter the data for this. So what you can do inside the parameters, what we can do is say enter school name, and I'll just do it like this, and I'll close it. Now when I run it, it gets the message. So if I go ahead and put in a school and hit OK, it brings back that. So that's with using parameters on it, and you can try that for the different criteria. Another thing that you can do is use wildcards, and wildcards can help you search, especially if you have a lot of data. So if I use a wildcard, and that's just the star here. Oops, I don't need that bracket. And I'm going to type the word hog. So just like this. And it's not going to find anything. And I'm going to explain why. So the wildcard means it's searching for anything before the word hog. And I'll hit run. Nothing comes back. But if I go back to my design view here, I'm going to change this. And notice that the star refers to like and how it changed it after I clicked out. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to type the word hog and put the star after. And if I click somewhere else, it changes right away, but the star now is after. Now I go ahead and run it, it finds it because it looked for the word hog that was at the very beginning, and then it says anything after that. And it did find with the wildcard said, well, it found hog and then anything after it, so it gave me back anything here. So let me give you another example. Now, if I was looking for anything with the word school in it, and I was going to type, and I'll try it like this, and I'm just going to, whoops, not like that. I got to make sure I spell it right, and then put it like this and click out. I got to make sure I deleted my bracket there that time, my quotation mark. So now if I go ahead and run it, nothing comes back. So I know there's ones with school in there, but if I go ahead and put it on the other side here, so I just put my star here and I'll end it. And I'm going to delete this one here to show you if I run it again, nothing still comes back. But I know that there's something with school in it. But now I'm going to try something else. I'm going to put a star at both ends of it and hit run. And there it is. It finds anything with a school because there was nothing. If I put the star at after school, it's looking that school was the first word, anything after it. And if I was looking for school at the end, it was looking at school at the end and anything in front of it. But when I put the stars at both ends, it found school no matter where it was. So those are just using the wildcard inside the criteria to help you search for things. Maybe you don't know what you're looking for exactly, but you know parts of it, and you can take a look at that wildcard. So what I want to do now is show some examples where you could use maybe the greater or equal or less than. And I don't have a lot of numerical data. I got a few things I can use it in though. And I'm going to add, right now I'm going to add a start date to this, and I'm going to add the student ID up here just for examples to show you. Now, down in the criteria, I can search for a specific date. So if I put an equal sign and put a date, it could look for that specific date. Or I could say maybe I wanted to find anybody who joined a school after 1980. So then at that point, if I use the greater sign and then just wrote September like this and then 1980, and if I click out, you can see it kind of changed to September 1st on this. Now, if I go ahead and run it, if I take a look at the start dates here, everything is past 1980. So I could use the less than to look before 1980, and you could use the combinations if you wanted to include the equal or less than. And I'm going to give you a page that you can look up for this too. So if I go back to view, I just want to give a different example with the student ID. So I'm just going to delete this. Let's say if I was looking for student IDs, and I'm just going to run this, and you can see all the different IDs we have here up to, we do have one at 31 here. So I could look for a specific ID if I knew what it was, like hit equals and 31, but I could do a range again also. So if I do, let's say do this, and we'll say just put 10 and run it, and you can see anything less than 10 would bring me back. So I just have the other thing I want to point out here. So I'm just going to bring over a page, and I'm going to put this link down below in the description. This is from Microsoft here, and I'm not going to go over all these query examples here, but I'm just going to move to these are examples here. You can see using the different criteria. I'm just showing you a little bit of the greater than and less than, but they'll give you examples here between dates on this, how to be using these in it, and you can kind of go through and create your own data to try it. You can see as we use the like and how I used that before, and has the for the wildcard we can use things like not. But there's lots of different examples here on how to search things in the query. And like I said, I'll put it down below, a link to this Microsoft page down below in the description. And these are what I'm talking about when you're using the greater than and less than to find something very specific. we're going to create a report based on this query here, this blood type. I've altered it a little bit. You can see I just have all I'm looking for are all the students that are pure blood. So I'm going to create a report based on this. And if I go under the Create tab and look in the ribbon, we see reports here where we can create a report. So I've been flipping back and forth between wizards or just picking design. In this case, I'm going to use the wizard again. I'm going to select the wizard. And now I get to pick what I want in the report. So if I look, I can go from the tables and I can go from the query. And I'm just going to go from the query here. And I want a report of the first name, last name, blood status, and go on like that. I'll put these 4 things. So I'm going to go ahead, hit next. How do you want to view your data? You can see it gives kind of a little, do I want it by students like this, or do I want it broken into schools? I think I'm going to leave it by students and go to next. Do you want to add any grouping levels? No, I'm fine on this. I'm going to go next. And do I want this? I'm going to go based on last name, ascending, next. And again, you can kind of get an idea of the layout, how it goes. If you look at this image over here, I'm going to go with tabular. This is my orientation. I'm going to leave it in portrait right now. I'll probably have some little bit of design editing to do here, and I'm just going to go ahead next, next, and this is where I'm going to call it, and I'll just call this blood report for students, and we'll go finish. And you can see right away, here is kind of the form view. I can see I right away have some editing to do because this isn't on the report. And then if I right click on this, you can see the different, I'm in print preview right now. If I go to report view, design view is where I'm going to change things. This is very similar to where I was in the forms editing. So what I'm going to do, go to here, I'm going to just select, I'm going to hold down shift and make some of these smaller. And excuse me, I'm going to move these over also. So I have them both selected and just shrink them a little bit like this. I'm going to select all these. I'm going to move them over, see what's happening. I'm going to go back to my print view, and it looks like this is still not coming up, but I think that's the size of the text box. If I go back to my, if I go back to my design view, and at this time, what I can do is I'll just select on both these to keep it even here. I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to stretch this out here. Now I'm going to go back to my print preview, and you can see now I can see everything. Now I could go back in my design view and start to change how I want to if I want these to be written a little bit different, because I probably just don't want this like this. So I could write student blood types up here, and I can just do the changes that I showed you before. I could stretch this out, I can move this around and make it kind of look the way I want to. So when you do your reports, remember you can design them to look how you want to move the different boxes around, like kind of similar to the forms, and then you can go to your different views. If you are in layout view, you can actually still move things around. You can see I don't like kind of working that when I'm moving things around, but it does give you a view what things are looking like a little bit better than the design view. But so you can go through with your header, and you notice you have your footer in here. But we do have up top, we can see we're in portrait here, we're landscape, or you could go to landscape, columns, page setup, and we do have our size of paper that you could change to whether or not to show the margins. So let's say if we're like it the way we have, we could save our report again. Then at this point, if I go to print preview, I could go ahead and hit print on this, and we have a few different options. Notice that we could email it from here, go text to file, or to an Excel file right from here too. So those are just some ways that you can get your reports ready for printing. Remember, you can go from the tables or the queries to print your reports, and then making it look the way you want on it. I just want to talk about when we finish up here, just ways that you can export all the information out of your Microsoft Access database, your tables and queries that you've created. To end this long tutorial here today on Microsoft Access, I just want to talk about ways you can export out the data that you've created, whether it be the tables or reports or queries, And you can see I have them all here on the side. And if I go under external data up top here under this tab here, you can see I have these different options. If I select, if I'm on this table right now, it depends on which one I'm on is the one that I'm going to export. So if I go to schools, notice that I have word merge for this table, but if I go to this forms, I don't. So if I was going to export, let's say this blood report here as a file, I could do it in a few different ways. This will open up any saved reports that I have, but let's say if I wanted to send it out in an Excel spreadsheet, all I'd have to do is go through, you can see it has a file name format. I can click on it to open up when it exports. I believe I already had one there, hit yes, and it will open up Microsoft Excel. And here we go with the information from that query is now in an Excel file. And you can do these, if I take a look at all the other ones, you could do a text file, or maybe you just want a PDF on this one. I'm going to hit publish and I'll just open in this, and you'll have that PDF. So maybe you want to be able to send that to somebody right through here. So I have this PDF. Another good option in this would be even just to email. So if you just, I better close that down here. Just give me a second. I'll close that down. And if you email it out here, like so, you could send the output. You're choosing how you want to format. So if you wanted to send it an email as a PDF, you could just do it from this point. And if you have your email set up, you could send it directly from there. So I just wanted to point out different ways that you could share out these different, all this data that you've collected in different ways. So I hope this tutorial has really got your mind around Microsoft Access today and understanding. There's a lot more to this program. I know this is a long tutorial. I just wanted to break things down, the different big components of it, but stay tuned for some more tutorials coming up on Microsoft Access. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Teachers Tech.